Hi everyone. As Father Patrick said, my name is Chantelle. I'm 19 and I'm from Galway. Since as far back as I remember, God has played a role in my life. When I say a role, I mean a character in my life. But he was more like that granduncle who lives in Liverpool that you don't see very often. I have so many memories of being dragged out of bed on a Sunday morning for Mass, or falling asleep to the drone of Hail Marys at one of the many prayer groups I was brought to as a child. I knew God existed, but I didn't know him. I thought that God was someone that I had to please in order to obtain his love. My granny was a massive inspiration for me. She had a beautiful love for the Lord, and I can still remember her praying the rosary in adoration in our local church. Sadly, when I was 6, both of my grandparents passed away from cancer within 3 months of each other. For the first time in my life, my whole world was turned upside down. The effects of their passing on my family were enormous. I could see my father slipping more day by day into a deep grief and depression. A year later, he had a mental breakdown and was admitted into a mental health institution. In a matter of months, 3 of the most important people in my life were taken from me, and I felt completely abandoned and alone. My dad ended up spending a few months as a patient in the hospital, undergoing treatment, and we would go to visit him as often as we could. When he finally came home, he wasn't the father I remembered. His faith in God had diminished significantly, and he was no longer the source of joy in our home. He was on medication and was visiting a counselor, but the whole situation seemed hopeless. During this time, I felt as though I was completely abandoned by everyone, including God. How could God be good if he had taken everything from me? My father struggled with depression for roughly 3 years, and through the hurt, I began to believe all the lies that Satan was planting in my mind. I started to believe that my dad's illness was all my fault, and that I hadn't loved him enough after my grandparents died. I thought that because my dad didn't want to live, that I wasn't worth living for. The lies I started to believe about myself just heaped on top of each other until I had a mountain large enough to crush all the self-esteem I had had and all my perceived self-worth. When I was 11, to try and relieve the feeling of pain I felt on the inside, I began to self-harm. At this point, I had completely given up on God, and I believed that even he had abandoned me. That was, if he even existed at all. My dad recovered from depression, and his faith began to flourish once again. He is now my greatest role model in the faith. In 2016, I went to an all-girls Catholic summer camp organised by the Home of the Mother and met some really wonderful girls. A few months later, they brought up going to U2000. I was too young to stay on site at the time, so I knew that if I went, I would get to stay at my friend's house and see all my friends. On the other hand, the very last thing I wanted to do was spend a weekend on my knees, praying to some distant, cruel God that may or may not have been real. I weighed up my options and decided that I would sacrifice a bit of praying to see my friends, and then I would come back home again, and nothing would change. But God had other plans. When I walked in the doors, a girl I knew was there called Nicola, and she called me over. She was wearing the maroon Holy Family Mission hoodie, and she introduced me to some of the other people doing Holy Family Mission. At the time, a weekend of prayer seemed like a nightmare for me. So I couldn't understand what was wrong with these people who wanted to spend a whole year praying all day, every day. There was something about these people, though, that really attracted me to them. They were so full of a joy that I so desperately wanted, and they really seemed like a family. Everyone at that retreat seemed to have this strange joy about them, and I wanted in. On the Saturday night, there is a healing service at the retreat, where each person gets an individual blessing with Jesus in the monstrance. As Jesus was brought around to every person, I decided that I had nothing to lose, and I opened my heart to him for the first time in what seemed like forever. I knelt down and asked him from my heart, God, if you're real, if this is all true, then why did you abandon me when I needed you the most? As I was being blessed, an overwhelming feeling of love came gushing over me, and tears started streaming down my face. I felt like so many memories that I was trying to suppress came rushing to the forefront of my mind, and I could see Jesus standing beside me, loving me in every single one. I knew then that God had never abandoned me, and I was loved with this unconditional love, and I knew that he would never leave me. I kept in contact with the friends I had met at that retreat, and they really helped me to grow in my faith. When I was 15, I felt God calling me to go to boarding school for a year on the Aran Islands. This was a massive change for me, both emotionally and spiritually. For the first time ever, no one was going to force me to go to Mass on a Sunday or to pray. If I really wanted this relationship with God, then I had to take my faith as my own. I ended up falling in love with the island and staying there for 3 years. The family I stayed with and the school environment provided a safe place for me to love and be loved. Throughout my time there, I was pushed out of my comfort zone and encouraged to try new things, especially speaking Irish all the time and singing in front of people. With time, my self-confidence began to increase. I could see myself growing closer to God as I could go to Mass and pray out of love for him and not out of obligation. In my final year of school, I felt like God was calling me to something more. I kept thinking of the impact that Holy Family Mission had on me at the U2000 retreat a few years before. I felt a great desire to apply, so I filled out my application form and did my interview. Thanks be to God, I was accepted, and here I am. My relationship with God has completely transformed from when I first arrived here. Through our study of the Catechism and our time for prayer here, I've really come to understand who God is as my Father, and it has changed everything for me. I'm learning what it is to truly be a daughter of God, and I am falling more and more in love with him. I've learned to rely on his strength and not my own when difficulties come my way. He has never abandoned me, and he loves me with an unconditional love. I'm so grateful to Holy Family Mission for leading me deeper into relationship with God, and for you all for supporting our mission and making this possible. As we say in Irish, Slán agus beannacht, which means goodbye and God bless.